was the pride of her people, skilled, fierce, and untouchable. But when she vanished, they braced for tragedy. No one expected to find her clinging to the very man they called their enemy. What happened in those missing days? And why did it change everything? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Dakota Territory stretched endlessly under the scorching summer sun of 1876, its golden prairies rippling like an ocean of grass beneath the relentless wind. The Lakota Sioux encampment sat nestled in a valley where the Powder River curved gracefully, its waters providing life to the hundreds of teepees that dotted the landscape. Among these dwellings stood the lodge of Tatanka Wanbli, the feared warrior whose name meant Thunder Eagle, a man whose reputation for ferocity in battle had spread across the plains like wildfire. Inside his teepee, Tatanka Wanbli sat cross-legged, his weathered face showing the countless battles he had survived. His daughter, Winona, moved gracefully around the lodge, her long black hair braided with leather strips and adorned with eagle feathers that marked her status as the daughter of a great warrior. At 19 summers, she possessed a striking beauty that turned heads throughout the camp, her high cheekbones and deep brown eyes, reflecting both her father's strength and her late mother's gentleness. Winona had learned to ride before she could properly walk, and her father had trained her in skills usually reserved for warriors. She could track a deer through dense forest, read the signs of approaching weather in the clouds, and handle a bow with precision that rivaled many of the young men in their tribe. Yet beneath her capable exterior lay a curious and compassionate heart that often questioned the endless cycle of violence between her people and the white settlers pushing ever westward. The morning had begun like any other, with Winona helping prepare food and tending to the horses, but the atmosphere in the camp carried an unusual tension. Scouts had returned at dawn with troubling news of a white man found wandering the plains, delirious and near death from exposure and dehydration. The council had debated what to do with him, and Tatanka Wanbli had ordered the stranger brought to the camp as a captive, believing he might possess valuable information about the movements of the bluecoat soldiers. Winona first saw the captive when the warriors dragged him into the center of the encampment. He was tall, perhaps 25 winters old, with sun-bleached brown hair that hung past his shoulders and a beard that obscured much of his face. His clothes were torn and filthy, the remnants of what had once been a frontiersman's practical attire. Despite his weakened state, there was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet dignity that intrigued her. The warriors had bound him to a post near the council lodge, and many in the tribe came to stare at the white captive, some spitting at his feet or hurling insults. Winona watched from a distance, noting how he bore the abuse without cowering, his blue-green eyes scanning the crowd with what seemed like understanding rather than fear. She wondered what circumstances had brought him to this fate, wandering alone in Lakota territory. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Tatanka Wanbli summoned Winona to his lodge. She entered to find her father smoking his pipe, the aromatic tobacco filling the air with its distinctive scent. His expression was grave, the lines around his eyes deepening as he considered his words carefully. "My daughter," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The council has decided the white man will remain our captive until we determine his purpose in our lands. You will be responsible for ensuring he receives enough water and food to keep him alive. We may have use for him in negotiations with the bluecoats." Winona felt surprise ripple through her. "Father, why have you chosen me for this task? Surely one of the elder women or even a warrior could—" Tatanka Wanbli raised his hand, silencing her gently. "You have your mother's compassion, but you also have my strength. You will not be fooled by any tricks he might attempt, and you will not show weakness that could be exploited. This is my decision." She bowed her head in acceptance, though her mind swirled with questions. "Yes, Father, I will do as you command." As darkness fell over the encampment, Winona approached the captive with a water skin and a small portion of dried meat. The other tribe members had returned to their lodges, leaving only a single guard watching from a respectful distance. The white man's head was bowed, his breathing shallow and labored. "You need to drink," Winona said in English, a language she had learned from a French trader who had visited their camp years ago, and taught her the basics of several tongues. The captive's head lifted slowly, his eyes widening in surprise at hearing his language. "You speak English," he rasped, his voice rough from thirst and exhaustion. "Yes," she replied simply, holding the water skin to his cracked lips. He drank eagerly but not desperately, showing restraint that suggested discipline and self-control. When he had drunk his fill, she pulled back and studied him more closely in the firelight. "What is your name, white man?" she asked, curious despite herself. He was silent for a long moment, as if debating whether to answer. Finally, he spoke. Daniel Mercer. I was a scout for a wagon train heading to Montana Territory." "Was?" Winona caught the past tense immediately. Daniel's expression darkened, pain flashing across his features. "Cholera struck the caravan 3 weeks ago, wiped out half the people in 5 days. The survivors panicked, split up. I tried to find help, rode for days until my horse went lame. Been walking ever since." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "I mean no harm to your people. I'm just trying to survive." Something in his voice rang true to Winona's ears, though she knew better than to trust a stranger completely. "My father is Tatanka Wanbli. Your survival depends on whether the council believes you are useful." "Thunder Eagle," Daniel translated quietly, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I've heard stories about him. They say he's never lost a battle." "The stories are true," Winona said with unmistakable pride. "He has protected our people for many winters." Juji offered him the dried meat, which he accepted gratefully. As he ate, she found herself observing details about him that contradicted her expectations of white settlers. His hands, though calloused and scarred, moved with careful deliberation. His eyes, despite his dire circumstances, held intelligence and what seemed like genuine remorse. "Why did you come to our lands?" she asked, the question carrying both personal curiosity and the suspicion her people rightfully held toward all white intruders. Daniel swallowed the last of the meat before answering. "The wagon train master chose the route, not me. I was hired because I know the terrain, or thought I did. My father was a trapper who taught me to respect the land and the people who lived on it long before we arrived. He traded fairly with several tribes, including the Lakota. He always said that pride and greed would be the downfall of the white expansion, that we took without asking, and wondered why we found only violence." His words surprised Winona. She had expected justifications or pleas for mercy, not this honest assessment that echoed her own observations. "Your father was wise. Few white men understand this truth. He died 5 years ago. Fever took him during a harsh winter in Wyoming. I've been trying to live by his teachings, but the world doesn't make it easy." Daniel shifted against his bonds, wincing as the rawhide cut into his wrists. "I know I'm at your mercy. I just want you to know that I understand why your people see us as enemies. I've seen the broken treaties, the senseless killing on both sides. If I die here, it's no more than the fate that could have befallen any of your warriors at the hands of men like me." Winona stood abruptly, unsettled by the unexpected kinship she felt with this stranger's words. "I will return tomorrow with water and food. Tonight, you should rest as much as your bonds allow." As she walked away, Daniel called out softly, "Thank you for your kindness. What's your name?" She hesitated, then looked back over her shoulder. "Winona. It means firstborn daughter." "Winona," he repeated, and somehow the way he said her name with respect and something almost like wonder made her heart beat faster in a way she didn't quite understand. That night, Winona lay in her sleeping robes, unable to find rest. The sound of the river flowing nearby usually soothed her, but tonight her mind kept returning to the captive and his words. She had been taught to view all white men as invaders, destroyers of the sacred balance her people maintained with the land. Yet Daniel seemed different, carrying within him an understanding that bridged the chasm between their worlds. She thought of her mother, who had died when Winona was 12, killed during a raid by white soldiers who had attacked their winter camp without provocation. The memory still burned with fierce intensity, fueling the anger she carried toward those who sought to destroy her people's way of life. But her mother had also taught her that hatred poisoned the spirit, that true strength came from wisdom and compassion, not blind vengeance. The following morning brought thick clouds that promised rain, unusual for the season, but welcome after weeks of drought. Winona rose early and prepared food for Daniel, aware of the curious glances from other women in the camp. Her friend Ayasha, whose name meant little one, approached as Winona filled a fresh water skin. "Why do you care for the white captive with such attention?" Ayasha asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. "Many say he should be left to suffer for the crimes of his people." Winona met her friend's eyes steadily, considering her answer carefully. "My father commanded me to keep him alive. I follow his orders, nothing more." Ayasha smiled knowingly. "Your words say one thing, but your eyes say another, my friend. Be careful. The council grows restless, and many warriors want to make an example of him." The warning settled heavily in Winona's chest as she made her way to where Daniel remained bound. The guard had changed, and now Chatan, a young warrior known for his hatred of white men, stood watch. His brother had been killed by cavalry soldiers the previous summer, and the loss had hardened his heart into something cold and unforgiving. "You waste good food on the white dog," Chatan spat as Winona approached. "He should be given nothing but suffering." "I follow my father's orders," Winona replied firmly, her status as Tatanka Wanbli's daughter lending her words authority that even Chatan couldn't easily dismiss. "Would you question Thunder Eagle's wisdom?" Chatan's jaw clenched, but he stepped aside, allowing her to approach the captive. Daniel looked worse than the previous evening, his face pale and drawn, his lips cracked and bleeding from the dry wind. Yet when he saw her, something like relief flickered across his features. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice hoarse but carrying unexpected warmth. Winona knelt beside him and lifted the water skin to his lips, noting how his hands trembled slightly from the stress his body had endured. As he drank, she studied the bruises forming on his arms where the bonds had chafed throughout the night. Despite everything, he hadn't complained or begged for better treatment. "How did you sleep?" she asked, surprising herself with the genuine concern in her voice. Daniel managed a weak smile. "I've had better nights, but I'm alive, and that's more than I expected when your warriors found me." He paused, his blue-green eyes searching her face. "You didn't have to come back, thank you." Something in his gratitude touched Winona deeply, though she tried to maintain her composure. "Eat," she said, offering him strips of pemmican. "You need strength." As he ate, dark clouds continued gathering overhead and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Winona glanced toward the council lodge where her father and the other elders were meeting, likely discussing Daniel's fate. She knew the deliberations could go on for days, and during that time, this man's life hung in precarious balance. "Tell me about your father," Daniel said suddenly, drawing her attention back to him. "What kind of man is Thunder Eagle when he's not leading warriors into battle?" The question caught Winona off guard. Most white captives spent their time pleading for release or plotting escape, not asking about their captor's personal life. "Why do you want to know?" "Because understanding someone helps bridge the gap between enemies," Daniel replied thoughtfully. "My father taught me that every man, no matter which side of a conflict he stands on, has reasons for his choices. Your father must be remarkable to have earned such respect from his people." Winona found herself relaxing slightly, drawn in by his genuine interest. "He is strong but fair. After my mother died, he raised me alone, teaching me skills most fathers reserve only for sons. He wanted me to be able to protect myself in a world that grows more dangerous each season." She paused, memories flooding back. "He tells stories of the old days, when the buffalo herd stretched beyond sight, when our people moved freely across these lands, without fear of broken treaties or soldiers who kill women and children." Pain shadowed Daniel's expression. "I've seen those massacres. I've seen what some of my people do in the name of progress and manifest destiny. It sickens me. My father refused to participate in such actions, and he taught me that the land doesn't belong to anyone, that we're all just temporary visitors who should treat it and each other with respect." "Your father sounds like a man of wisdom," Winona said softly. "He would have been welcome at our fires." "I think he and Thunder Eagle would have understood each other," Daniel agreed, then added quietly, "just as I hope you and I might come to understand each other, despite everything that separates us." Before Winona could respond, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly intensifying into a steady downpour. Within moments, both were soaked, and Winona realized that Daniel, already weakened and exposed to the elements, could fall seriously ill if left in the storm. She looked toward Chatan, who watched with obvious satisfaction at the white man's discomfort. Making a decision that she knew would cause controversy, Winona stood and approached the warrior. "I'm moving the captive to the shelter near the storage lodges. My father wants him kept alive, and he'll die of exposure if left here." Chatan's eyes narrowed. "Your father said nothing about shelter. He remains where he is. Then you can explain to Thunder Eagle why his captive died of pneumonia." Before the council finished their deliberations, Winona shot back, her voice carrying the steel she'd inherited from her father. "I'll make sure he knows you prevented me from following his orders to keep the prisoner alive." The standoff lasted several tense heartbeats before Chatan grudgingly stepped aside. "Fine, but I'll be watching him. If he tries to escape, I'll put an arrow through his heart before he takes 3 steps. Winona quickly untied Daniel's bonds, catching him as he nearly collapsed, his legs unable to support him properly after being bound for so long. She looped his arm over her shoulders, surprised by his solid weight and the controlled strength she could feel even in his weakened state. Together, they stumbled through the rain toward a small structure used for storing dried goods, empty now in the summer months. Inside, the shelter was dry and considerably warmer than the open air. Winona helped Daniel sit against the wall, noting how he moved carefully as if every muscle ached. Rain drummed against the hide covering overhead, creating a rhythm that somehow made the small space feel even more intimate. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're putting yourself at risk for me." "I follow my father's commands," Winona insisted, though they both knew she'd interpreted those commands liberally. "You're no use to anyone dead." Daniel studied her face in the dim light filtering through gaps in the shelter. "I think there's more to it than that. I think you see something in me that others don't, just as I see something in you that goes beyond duty to your father." Winona's heart raced at his words, at the intensity in his eyes that spoke of a connection forming between them that defied logic and circumstance. "You speak dangerously, white man. We are enemies." "Are we?" Daniel asked softly. "Because when I look at you, I don't see an enemy. I see someone who understands that the world doesn't have to be divided into sides, that maybe there's another way forward if people are brave enough to seek it." Before Winona could respond, voices outside made her tense. She moved to the entrance and peered out to see several warriors approaching, led by her father. Tatanka Wambli's expression was unreadable as he took in the scene, his daughter emerging from the shelter where she'd moved the white captive without explicit permission. "Daughter," he said, his voice carrying across the rain-soaked ground. "Come." Winona stepped out into the downpour, lifting her chin with the pride and courage her father had instilled in her. "I moved the prisoner to prevent him from dying of exposure. You commanded me to keep him alive." Tatanka Wanbli's eyes flickered with something that might have been approval, though his face remained stern. "The council has reached a decision. The white man will undergo a test. If he survives, we will hear his words and consider releasing him. If he fails, he dies. This is our way." "What test?" Winona demanded, though she already felt dread building in her chest. "He will participate in the warrior's trial," her father explained. "He will run the gauntlet of our warriors, and if he reaches the sacred tree at the valley's far end while still standing, he will have earned the right to speak his truth to the council." Winona knew the gauntlet well. Warriors formed 2 lines, and the person running between them endured blows from sticks and fists as they ran. Many strong men had fallen unconscious before reaching the end. In Daniel's weakened condition, the trial could easily kill him. "Father, he's barely recovered from near death in the desert," she protested. "This isn't a fair test of his worth." "Life is not fair, daughter," Tatanka Wambli replied, though something in his eyes suggested he understood her concern. "The trial will take place when the rain ends. Prepare him as you see fit. This is the council's decision, and I will not alter it." As her father and the other warriors departed, Winona returned to the shelter where Daniel waited. He'd obviously heard everything, and his expression held acceptance rather than fear. "How bad is this gauntlet?" he asked calmly. Bad enough that strong warriors have fallen unconscious, Winona admitted, her mind already racing through possibilities. You'll need every advantage I can give you. Over the next hours, as rain continued falling, Winona worked to prepare Daniel for the trial ahead. She brought him more food and water, encouraging him to eat and drink as much as possible to restore his strength. She massaged his legs and arms, working circulation back into muscles that had been bound and inactive. And she talked to him, learning his story in greater detail while sharing her own. Daniel spoke of growing up in the wilderness with his father, learning to trap and hunt, discovering a love for the untamed lands that most settlers sought to conquer rather than understand. He described his mother who had died giving birth to him, and how his father had honored her memory by living according to principles of respect and fairness. He talked about the loneliness of being caught between worlds, too wild for civilized society, but too white to be fully accepted by the native peoples his father had admired. Winona found herself opening up in ways she rarely did, speaking of her mother's death and how it had changed her father, making him more protective but also more determined to ensure she could survive in an increasingly hostile world. She described her own struggles with the hatred she felt toward white settlers, while simultaneously questioning whether violence truly solved anything or simply perpetuated more suffering. "You're remarkable," Daniel said at one point, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Strong and compassionate, fierce and gentle. I've never met anyone like you." Winona felt warmth spread through her chest at Daniel's words, a feeling both thrilling and terrifying in its unfamiliarity. "You speak too freely for a man facing possible death tomorrow," she said, though her voice carried no real rebuke. "Maybe that's exactly why I speak freely," Daniel replied, shifting closer to her in the dim shelter. "When you're not sure if you'll see another sunrise, pretending becomes pointless. From the moment I saw you yesterday, even through my exhaustion and fear, I felt something I've never experienced before, like finding something I didn't know I'd been searching for my entire life." His honesty pierced through Winona's defenses, reaching the part of her heart she'd kept carefully guarded since her mother's death. "We barely know each other. We come from different worlds that are at war. And yet here we are," Daniel said softly, his hand reaching out tentatively. When she didn't pull away, he gently touched her fingers, the contact sending electricity through both of them. "Sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet. My father used to say that the Great Spirit, or God, or whatever name we give to the force that guides the universe, sometimes brings people together for reasons we can't immediately understand. Maybe you were meant to find me, Winona. Maybe I was meant to stumble into your territory, into your care." Winona's practical nature warred with the emotions swelling inside her. Everything about this situation defied logic. She was the daughter of the tribe's greatest warrior, tasked with guarding a white captive who should be nothing more than an enemy. Yet Daniel's words resonated with a truth she felt deep in her bones, an inexplicable certainty that their meeting carried significance beyond mere chance. "If you die tomorrow," she whispered, allowing her vulnerability to show, "I will have lost something precious before I even fully understood what I'd found." Daniel's other hand came up to gently cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with reverence. "Then help me survive. Teach me what I need to know to make it through this trial. I won't die easily, Winona. I have too much to live for now." The rain finally ceased as evening approached, leaving the world cleansed and fresh. Winona spent the remaining hours instructing Daniel on how to move through the gauntlet, explaining that speed mattered less than protecting his head and maintaining balance. She showed him how to use his arms to deflect blows, how to keep his knees slightly bent to absorb impacts without falling, how to focus on the goal ahead rather than the pain of the moment. "The sacred tree stands at the valley's eastern end, near where the river bends," she explained, her hands demonstrating the protective positions he should maintain. "It's perhaps 300 paces from where you'll start. The warriors will strike hard, but not with weapons meant to kill. Still, the blows will hurt terribly, and you must stay conscious and keep moving forward no matter what." Daniel practiced the movements she showed him, his body still weak but his determination evident in every gesture. Winona watched him with growing admiration and fear, knowing that tomorrow would determine not just his fate, but potentially both their futures. That night she returned him to the post where Chetan stood guard, the warrior's hostile glare making clear his disapproval of the time she'd spent with the captive. As she secured Daniel's bonds loosely enough to allow circulation, she leaned close and whispered, "Be strong tomorrow. Survive this, and I promise we'll find a way forward together." "I'll survive," Daniel promised, his eyes holding hers with fierce conviction. "For you, I'll endure anything." Winona barely slept that night, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. She thought about what her father might say if he knew her feelings for the white captive, wondered if the council would truly honor their word and release Daniel if he survived the gauntlet, questioned whether love could truly bloom so quickly or if she was fooling herself about the depth of her emotions. Yet every time doubt crept in, she remembered the way Daniel looked at her, the genuine understanding and respect in his voice, the connection that felt more real than anything she'd experienced before. Her mother had once told her that true love announced itself not with gentle whispers, but with the force of summer lightning, impossible to ignore and transformative in its power. Perhaps this was that lightning, striking at the most impossible moment imaginable. Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm having passed completely. The entire tribe gathered in the valley as warriors formed two lines stretching toward the sacred cottonwood tree that marked the trial's endpoint. Winona stood with the women and elders, her heart pounding as Daniel was brought forward, his hands unbound, his shirt removed to expose his lean, muscled torso, already bearing the marks of his ordeal. Tatanka Wanbli stepped forward, his powerful voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "White man, you will run the gauntlet of our warriors. If you reach the sacred tree while still standing, you will have earned the right to speak your truth and seek your freedom. If you fall and cannot rise, you will die here. Do you understand?" Daniel's gaze swept across the hostile faces surrounding him, before finding Winona in the crowd. Their eyes met, and she saw her own determination reflected back at her. "I understand," he said clearly, "and I accept this trial." At Tatanka Wanbli's signal, Daniel began running. The first blows came immediately, warriors striking with sticks and fists as he passed between them. Winona watched with her heart in her throat as he employed the techniques she'd taught him, keeping his arms raised to protect his head, maintaining his balance even as strikes landed against his ribs, back, and shoulders. Blood appeared on his skin as the blows continued, some warriors striking harder than others, but Daniel kept moving forward with single-minded determination. Halfway through the gauntlet, a particularly vicious strike to his kidney nearly brought him down, and Winona gasped, her hands clenching into fists. But Daniel recovered, stumbling forward even as more blows rained down upon him. The sacred tree seemed impossibly far away, yet with each painful step Daniel drew closer. Winona could see the toll the trial was taking, could see his legs beginning to shake, his breathing becoming labored. Yet he didn't stop, didn't fall, driven by something deeper than mere survival instinct. When Chatan stepped forward near the end of the line, his face twisted with hatred, Winona's breath caught. The young warrior swung his stick with excessive force, clearly intending to end Daniel's run. But Daniel, perhaps sensing the increased danger, ducked at the last moment, and Chatan's blow glanced off his shoulder instead of connecting with his skull. The final 20 paces seemed to take forever, each step a monumental effort of will over failing flesh. Blood streaked Daniel's back and sides, his face was swelling from the impacts, and his entire body trembled with exhaustion and pain. Yet still he moved forward, his eyes fixed on the sacred tree ahead. When Daniel finally reached the cottonwood and grasped its trunk with shaking hands, still standing despite everything, a collective gasp went through the assembled tribe. Even the warriors who had struck him looked surprised that he'd endured the entire gauntlet without falling. Winona felt tears streaming down her face, relief and pride overwhelming her. Tatanka Wanbli walked slowly to where Daniel leaned against the tree, breathing hard and clearly fighting to remain conscious. The great warrior studied the white man with new respect visible in his eyes. "You have shown courage and endurance worthy of a warrior," Tatanka Wanbli said, his voice carrying approval that surprised many in the crowd. "Speak your truth, white man. The council will hear you." Daniel straightened despite his obvious pain, his voice rough but clear. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I come from a wagon train struck by disease, not as an invader but as a survivor seeking only to live. I know your people have suffered terrible wrongs at the hands of men who look like me. I've seen the broken treaties, the senseless violence, the destruction of ways of life that honored this land long before my people arrived. He paused, gathering strength, his eyes finding Winona in the crowd. But I also know that hatred and revenge only perpetuate suffering. My father taught me to respect all people, to see the humanity in everyone regardless of the color of their skin or the language they speak. These past days, your daughter Winona has shown me more kindness and understanding than I deserved as an enemy. She has taught me that bridges can be built between our peoples if we have the courage to try. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical. Tatanka Wanbli raised his hand for silence, his gaze shifting between Daniel and his daughter, who stood with tears on her cheeks and hope blazing in her eyes. "You speak well, Daniel Mercer," the great warrior said thoughtfully. "But words are easy. What would you do if we released you? Would you return to your people and lead soldiers back to destroy us?" "Never," Daniel said with absolute conviction. "I would seek to build understanding, to be a voice for peace between our peoples. Or," he hesitated, then continued with quiet courage, "I would ask permission to remain here, to learn your ways and prove through my actions that not all white men are enemies, to prove that I'm worthy of the trust your daughter has placed in me." The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. Winona's heart soared even as she saw the resistance in many faces. The idea of a white man living among them was unprecedented and controversial. Tatanka Wanbli held up his hand again, his expression unreadable. He walked over to his daughter, motioning for her to join him away from the crowd. When they were alone, he spoke quietly but firmly. "Daughter, I have watched you these past days. I see how you look at this white man and how he looks at you. This is dangerous ground you walk upon." "Father, Winona began, but he stopped her with a gentle touch. "Let me finish. Your mother, before she died, made me promise that I would not let hatred consume me or you. She said that the cycle of violence would only end when people were brave enough to choose a different path. I have thought much about her words, especially as I watch our world changing in ways we cannot stop." He paused, his weathered face showing the weight of difficult decisions. "This Daniel, he has proven his courage and endurance. More importantly, he speaks with honesty and respect. I see in him qualities that remind me of the traitors your mother and I befriended long ago, men who saw us as people rather than obstacles." Winona's eyes widened with hope. "Father, what are you saying?" "I am saying that if this white man wishes to remain among us, to learn our ways and prove his worth, I will support his petition before the council. But know this, daughter, the path you choose will not be easy. Many will oppose this union between our peoples. You will face scorn and suspicion from both sides." "I don't care," Winona said fiercely. "I feel something for him that I've never felt before, Father. Something that makes me believe we're meant to bridge the divide between our worlds." Tatanka Wanbli's stern expression softened, and he pulled his daughter into an embrace. "You have your mother's brave heart. Very well. We will see what the council decides." The council meeting lasted hours, with heated debates about whether allowing a white man to remain among them would bring danger or opportunity. Some argued for Daniel's execution despite his completion of the trial, while others, swayed by Tatanka Wanbli's support and impressed by Daniel's endurance, advocated for giving him a chance. Finally, as the sun began setting on the second day after Daniel's capture, the council reached their decision. Tatanka Wanbli emerged from the council lodge and addressed the assembled tribe. "The council has decided that Daniel Mercer may remain among us for one full cycle of seasons. During this time, he will learn our language, our customs, and our ways. He will hunt with our warriors, work alongside our people, and prove through his actions whether he is worthy of trust. At the end of this time, we will decide whether he may stay permanently or must leave our lands forever." Relief flooded through Winona as she looked at Daniel, who despite his injuries stood tall, his eyes shining with gratitude and determination. The crowd's reaction was mixed, but Tatanka Wanbli's authority carried weight that even the dissenters respected. Over the following weeks, Daniel immersed himself in learning the Lakota way of life. Winona became his primary teacher, and their bond deepened with each passing day. She taught him the language, showing him how to properly honor the buffalo after a successful hunt, explaining the spiritual beliefs that guided her people's relationship with the natural world. In return, Daniel shared knowledge of tracking techniques his father had taught him, offered insights into white settlement patterns that could help the tribe avoid dangerous encounters, and proved himself willing to work harder than anyone expected. The physical attraction between them had been immediate, but as they spent time together, something far deeper developed. They discovered shared values about the sacredness of the land, the importance of honor and honesty, and the belief that peace was worth fighting for, even when war seemed inevitable. They laughed together while working, shared quiet moments watching sunsets over the prairie, and gradually built a foundation of friendship that made their growing love feel solid and real. Not everyone approved. Chatan and several other young warriors made their hostility clear, and some of the elder women whispered that Winona was betraying her mother's memory by caring for a white man. But Tatanka Wanbli's continued support, combined with Daniel's genuine respect and tireless efforts to contribute to the tribe, slowly began changing minds. 3 months after Daniel's arrival during the harvest moon, Winona and Daniel sat together by the river, watching moonlight dance across the water. Daniel had filled out from regular meals and hard work, his body now carrying the lean strength of a warrior. The bruises and cuts from the gauntlet had healed, leaving only faint scars that he wore with quiet pride. "I never imagined my life would lead here," Daniel said softly, his hand finding Winona's. "Wandering half-dead through the prairie, I thought I'd reached my end. Instead, I found my beginning." Winona leaned against him, feeling completely safe and content for the first time since her mother's death. "My mother used to say that the Great Spirit writes our stories in ways we cannot predict. I think she would have liked you, Daniel. She would have seen what I see, a good man with a brave heart." Daniel turned to face her fully, his blue-green eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Winona, I know I still have much to prove, and I know our future is uncertain, but I need you to know that I love you. Completely, deeply, with everything I am. You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me a reason to truly live." Tears of joy spilled down Winona's cheeks as she cupped his face in her hands. "I love you too, Daniel Mercer. You've shown me that the walls between our peoples are not as insurmountable as I believed, that love can grow even in the most unlikely soil." Their kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, sealing the bond that had been forming since that first rain-soaked afternoon in the shelter. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, their foreheads resting together as they breathed in sync. The full cycle of seasons passed, bringing winter's harsh cold, spring's renewal, summer's abundance, and autumn's preparation. Through it all, Daniel proved himself again and again. He became proficient in the Lakota language, participated in successful hunts, and even helped negotiate a peaceful resolution when a group of white trappers wandered too close to tribal lands, using his unique position to facilitate understanding between both sides. When the council finally met to determine Daniel's permanent status, the decision was far less contentious than it would have been a year earlier. Tatanka Wanbli spoke eloquently about Daniel's contributions and character, and even Chatan, while not fully reconciled, admitted grudgingly that the white man had proven his worth. The council granted Daniel permission to remain permanently, and with Tatanka Wanbli's blessing, to marry Winona in a ceremony that honored both Lakota traditions and the values Daniel's father had taught him. Their wedding took place on a brilliant autumn day, with the entire tribe gathered to witness the unprecedented union. Winona wore a dress of white doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork that had taken months to complete, while Daniel dressed in traditional Lakota warrior attire that Tatanka Wanbli had gifted him. As they stood together before the sacred fire, Tatanka Wanbli performed the ceremony, binding their hands with a beautifully woven cord while speaking blessings in Lakota. When the moment came for Daniel to speak his vows, he did so in Lakota, his pronunciation perfect after months of dedicated practice. "Winona, you are the sunrise after the darkest night, the water that saved me from dying of thirst, the home I never knew I was seeking. I promise to honor you, to protect our people, to walk beside you through whatever challenges come. and to love you with all the strength of my spirit for all my days." Winona's vows, spoken with tears of happiness streaming down her face, were equally heartfelt. "Daniel, you came to us as a stranger and became family, came as an enemy and became beloved. You've shown me that courage means building bridges rather than walls, that love is stronger than hatred, and that our futures are not bound by our pasts. I promise to stand with you, to cherish you, and to prove every day that our love can light the way toward understanding between our peoples." When they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted in celebration. Even those who had initially opposed the union caught up in the joy and hope the moment represented. Tatanka Wanbli watched with pride shining in his eyes, knowing his wife would have approved of their daughter's brave choice. The feast that followed lasted well into the night, with dancing, singing, and storytelling that wove Daniel into the fabric of the tribe completely. As Winona and Daniel danced together under the stars, surrounded by the people who had become their family, they knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would come. Tensions between white settlers and native peoples would continue to escalate, and they would face opposition from both sides. But they also knew that their love had already overcome impossible odds, that the bond they'd forged was strong enough to weather any storm. Together, they represented hope for a different future, proof that understanding could triumph over hatred, and that the human heart recognized no boundaries when it found its true home. As the celebration continued around them, Daniel pulled Winona close, whispering in her ear, "Thank you for finding me when I was lost." Winona smiled, her heart full to overflowing. "Thank you for being worth finding." And under the vast Dakota sky, surrounded by the people they loved, the feared Sioux warrior's daughter and the white captive who had won her heart began their life together, a living bridge between two worlds, bound by love that had conquered fear, prejudice, and circumstance itself. Their story would be told for generations, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could take root in the most unexpected places, and that love, when brave enough to defy convention, could indeed change the world.